Why is there so much pain in the world?
Don't do that again, or you'll be in big trouble.
Ugh. How could God love those people?
All right, GracePoint, I'm so grateful to share with you guys my friend, Pastor Jeff here. A few years ago, I was part of this coaching cohort with different pastors around the entire world, and it just so happened out of all the entire world, there was another person in this cohort, Jeff, that happened to be in Washington State. Not only is he in Washington, but I found out we actually live 15 minutes away from each other. And Jeff, being a brave person that he was, kind of like a blind date, messaged me and said, "Hey, would you like to get coffee?" I said yes. And then I ended up meeting him. And what I did not realize is that through this cohort and through Jeff being vulnerable and reaching out to me is that I would have a best friend in ministry. So I have been so grateful. He's been with me some of my highs as well as some of my lows, and just doing life together with another pastor, being able to pray for one another, it's just been such a wonderful blessing. So when Barry was talking about Scars and Skeptics with this particular message, I thought of no other than recommending Jeff to you. So would you give a round of applause that we welcome Jeff?
Thank you, Scott. Yes, my name is Jeff Jamba. I lead at Rainier View Christian Church down in the Graham, Washington area, just south of Puyallup. And I've been married to my wife, Amy, for 23 years. And so, thank you. I joke that I dodged that bullet of having to be on apps for dating. So my online dating experience is just with Scott. So it worked out. So if you need tips or pointers, come talk to me afterwards on that. No, in all seriousness, we know if you're young out there or you're, second, third go around, we know that apps are a garbage fire. So prayers, but you're in the right spot. You're at GracePoint, so you're good there. We got 2 kids. My son Carter just wrapped up his first year at Central Washington. My daughter Kobe is going to be a junior in high school this year. And let me see, show of hands, Washington State lifers. You've lived in Washington State your entire life. Yeah, I'm one of those annoying Californians that's coming to ruin your state. So transplant from the Los Angeles area. I know you blame the driving on us. It's not us, okay? Everyone drives bad. So basically, but we'll take the blame, sure. We are so glad to be up here in the Pacific Northwest. We just absolutely love it. I like to say that there's nowhere more beautiful than summertime in the PNW, just seeing God's beauty on display in so many amazing places and spaces, and the sun's out. So it's been great to be here. And I'm so privileged to be here to continue in this series, Stories of Scars and Skeptics. And I just want to commend not only Pastor Barry, but all of you for being a church that's committed. You said, we want to reach 2,000 people for Jesus. See, 2,000 people here at GracePoint growing in what it means to know and follow and serve Jesus and follow in the way of Jesus. That is not an easy task. Any church that sets its mind to do that is going to face opposition. There's going to be challenges. It requires you to give up preferences. And so I just want to commend you in that. Wherever you're at in your journey here at GracePoint, whether you've been here decades, whether you've been here days, God has a role and a purpose and a place for you here to accomplish that goal that he has for you. We need more churches with this kind of outward mindset to reach out and reach into our communities. And in particular for you guys right here in Kitsap County. Last service, I ping-ponged everywhere in my brain because I'm down in Pierce County, so I'm used to saying Pierce County, and I hit Pierce, King, Snohomish, skipped right over Kitsap, so we got it covered here now. But glad to be continuing in this series because we need to be on mission for Jesus because we live in a world full of brokenness. and people looking for hope and being unsure where to find it. It's curious that we live in a time where with more spiritual openness, the last time we saw this much spiritual openness was 9/11, 2001. And so we have this opportunity to answer the questions people have, to speak to the sense of hopelessness they have. When they have difficult things go on in their life, when you face a hard challenge and don't know what to do, man, that's where God can show up. And so we're going to be looking at a woman out of the Gospel of Mark. And so you can open up in your Bibles there, your digital or your physical Bible. But Mark 7 is where we're going to be. I'm going to get there in a moment. But we're going to see an example of this woman that exemplifies a deep and humble faith and what we can learn from her about being in a place where we run out of ourselves. Right? We run out of answers on our own, and we need something bigger and more than us in whatever we're facing. I had one of these moments with our son Carter when he was about 9 months old. We didn't want to be those first-time parents that were super overprotective and worrying about everything, and so we tried to be, like just pick the pacifier off the ground, put it back in his mouth, it's fine. But about 9 months old, we were over having dinner with some friends from church, and she happened to be a nurse. And Carter, kind of the past couple days, had developed these little tiny spots. It looked like a tiny rash on his torso, and a little bit on his limbs. And so we kind of did the Simba thing. We held him out in front of us to our friend, hey, is this normal? Right? As a first-time parent, you don't know what you're doing, and the internet was not as robust as it is today. And so you're like, what's going on here? And she's looking. She's like, it could be a lot of things. It's probably nothing, but you probably should take him in just to get it checked out. So my wife Amy made an appointment, got him in that following morning. So takes him in. And they say, yeah, it could be a lot of things. We're going to run some blood tests just to make sure, just to rule anything out, but I'm sure it's nothing. 2 hours later, my wife Amy gets a phone call from the doctor's office. Hey, we don't think it's leukemia. Which is I don't know if our person missed a day of their training, but maybe not lead with that. But anyways, that was how the call went. We don't think it's leukemia, but you need to get him ASAP to the Children's Hospital. We're in Southern California at the time, so Children's Hospital of Long Beach. You need to get him there immediately. So my wife Amy, she calls me. She's en route. I'm at church at the time. I just blazing down the street as fast as is responsible in this situation, right? And I'm just praying just the most deep, honest prayers. God, please make my son be okay. Please save my son. Whatever's going on, would you be with him? And we show up and we get there. And if you've ever been a parent in this situation where something's wrong with your child and you don't know what it is or you can't do anything, you know that you are not enough in that situation. And so fortunately for us, they run some tests and they say, okay, no, he's got something. It's called ITP. It's completely treatable. He just needs a transfusion. Unfortunately for us, there were two options based on your blood type. One was 3 hours, one was 3 days. We drew the 3-day option. And so he's 9 months old. He has these little things called no-nos, and they're little planks that keep his arms out like this for 3 hours straight. And it's a hard situation, but a short one overall for us. He's going to be okay. But the final day that we're there, I don't know, just in our exhaustion of being young parents and dealing with something that we didn't expect that we were going to deal with and walking through this, on the last day, we kind of walk out of our room, and there's a woman walking down the hall with that look that comes from a fatigue that you've been carrying a burden for a long time. And so she looks at us with those tired but yet kind eyes, and she says, "Welcome to the floor." And I realized where they had put us. They put us in the cancer care wing. And so to this day, I don't know what I said, in response of we're checking out today, sorry. I don't know how to feel in this moment. But the whole encounter reminded me when we face unexpectedness especially around our kids, right? And that we can't do anything. We're drawn to grasp to anything that might give us hope. And I'm so grateful for the medical care that we had access to. I'm so grateful that we had that for our child. But at the end of the day, I knew that I needed a source of hope and strength and encouragement that was even bigger and beyond that. And in our family, we've got a nephew, and he's a few weeks old. And man, this story just brings me back to that moment. He's actually in the hospital right now. His name's Benji. He's in the Boise area. And so I'm just gonna employ everybody at GracePoint this morning. I did it at both services. He's in the hospital. He's doing okay, but he's got a final test before he can go home, just to rule out anything more serious. And so would you pray for Benji today, if you could, just at some point, just be praying for him, full and complete healing, that he can go home, and that would mean the world to me. I'd be so honored by that. But what do we do when we find ourselves faced with those situations where we run out of ourselves? And I don't know what that issue is for you right now that maybe you're working through, what you're maybe suffering through, a burden, a challenge. Maybe for you, it's something at work that you're dealing with, that you don't know how to face this problem, that you don't have the authority or the ability to fix or solve, and it's just wearing on you and it's weighing on you. Maybe your challenges are more financial. You're like, I got this debt and I don't have enough money coming in and everything's more expensive and I just don't know what I'm going to do. And you're suffering through some financial issues or challenges right now. Or maybe for you, it's a health diagnosis that you're in the midst of, maybe on the front end, maybe you're walking through. Maybe it's a relational challenge in your family, a dysfunction, a conflict that's been ongoing that you wish could be resolved, but you're just not sure how it's going to be made right. I don't know what you're carrying. I don't know what you're suffering through this morning, but I do know this, that suffering can serve like an alarm clock to awaken us to our need for God. See, suffering can serve like an alarm clock to awaken us to our need for God. I'm not talking about one of those cute, alarm clocks that warms up the room with gentle light and it's very soft, like da 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 da. No, I'm talking that old school alarm clock that gives you a small heart attack in the morning. That kind of alarm clock. That's what suffering can do. See, we're too prone as people when things are going well that God kind of fades in the background. He was riding shotgun, now he's in the back, maybe he's in the trunk now, right? But when suffering arrives, one of the things that it can do is it can awaken us to our need for God. And perhaps the greatest tragedy that I want you to avoid is missing God showing up in a more real and a more powerful way in your life if you're facing something difficult, hard, you're suffering through something right now in your life. And so we're gonna look at the example of this woman from Mark chapter 7. I'm gonna pick up in verse 24, and we're gonna see the remarkable example of faith that she is, but yet is so unexpected in Jesus' day. Mark chapter 7, verse 24. Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. First, let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Lord, she replied, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, for such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. She went home and found her child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Now, I know before we go any further and look at the example of faith of this woman, the question you have, did Jesus really just call her that? Like, what is going on here that Jesus would say this? And so we're gonna unpack this and kind of explain what's going on in context. But right off the bat, I want you to know this, that Jesus is not demeaning or degrading this woman with this encounter here. That's not what's going on. What he's doing is he's revealing a depth of faith that he wants all of his followers to come to possess. See, what he's doing in this moment is drawing out this deep, humble faith that this woman has that he desires for all of his followers to possess. Now, to understand this phrase well, we've got to understand the context. And so I heard somebody say it this way, that Jesus is king, but context is queen. And so when we come to the Bible, we have to understand that the Bible is a collection of books, 66 books. We're in one of the Gospels, which is a recording of the life and teachings of Jesus. But then in any given book, you want to look at what comes right before and what comes right after to often make sense of what you are reading. And so there's something crucial that comes right before here, this encounter that Jesus has with this group of people called the Pharisees. Now, if you're unfamiliar with who the Pharisees are, they are kind of like an antagonist towards Jesus in the gospel accounts. The Pharisees were people from Israel in the first century, Jewish people, and the Old Testament, as we call it, they would have just referred to it as their scriptures, the Jewish scriptures. There's about 600 or so laws and commands in the Old Testament. The Pharisees said, that's not enough. Let's make more. They put laws around those laws so they would never even be close to breaking one of them. And so because they're like, we're taking all these measures to not break any of these rules, any of these laws, then they were like, and so we are the best. We are superior than everybody else because of the way that we're going about pursuing God. And so, like, for example, the way this kind of self-pride crept in, this is a prayer that a Pharisee would have prayed in the first century. Dear God, thank you that I was not born a Gentile nor a woman. This was their frame of reference, Gentiles being anyone who was not Jewish, and obviously women being not male. And so right before the passage that we were going to encounter, that we just read about the woman, Jesus has this encounter with the Pharisees. And so I want to read this now. Look back up with me at the beginning of Mark 7, picking up in verse 6. This is what Jesus has to say about the Pharisees. He replied, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites. As it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. You have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to human traditions. You catch that? They found their strength, their source of hope in what they were doing. And then later on, after this encounter, Jesus gathers all his followers. He says, hey, come here. I want to make sure that you get what I'm talking about here. And it goes on to say in Mark 7, verse 20, with his followers, he, Jesus, went on, what comes out of a person is what defiles them. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and defile a person. And so this context helps us make sense of Jesus' use of this phrase, like throwing the scraps to the dogs and the woman's response back. Because again, the Pharisees thought, we're the chosen of the chosen. We are the best. We're the VIPs of them. And so Jesus wants to make sure that his followers and that we today understand that it is not what you do, it is not your background, it is not your job, it is not what church you go to, it's none of these external things that make you right with me. My ability to show up in your life is solely dependent upon your faith, your trust in me. That's how I can work and show up in your life. Now, they did understand, and the woman does as well, that the promise in the Old Testament was a Messiah would come, as it says elsewhere in the Bible, first to the Jew, then to the Gentile. But that kingdom that the Messiah was coming to establish would extend to the whole world, that people from all tongues, tribes, nations, and languages would be part of his kingdom. And so really what's going on with that comment around the comparison to dogs, Jesus is picking up a common statement that was derogatory in nature that Jewish people would use to describe non-Jewish people or Gentiles. In essence, it's kind of a first century diss track that people laid down to talk about people not like us. And so Jesus is using this common language of the day to again, make this point that it's not about your status. It's not about your standing. It is solely about your faith. And this is what the woman does. See, in her comment back, she's highlighting two things. One, in first century Judaism in particular, but throughout the Old Testament, there's a value on really wittiness is tied to wisdom. If you have a witty response or retort back, it's a evidence of wisdom being there. And so this woman is exercising wisdom, but most importantly, she's exercising a deep and humble faith when she says, but surely there's something for me in that statement, right? Like, I know that you're coming to the nation of Israel first, but surely you have something to offer me. There's something you can do about the situation with my daughter because I am out of solutions. I'm out of options. I don't have anywhere else to turn. And because of that faith, Jesus says, go. Because of your faith, your daughter is healed. Her great faith is rewarded here. And so this statement here that seems like a head scratcher to us on the surface, really I would kind of summarize it this way, that Jesus is using the common divisive thinking of the day to ultimately make this point, that all of us can have access to Jesus' power and his new life, not through what we do, not through our own bank accounts, not through our positions, not through our own efforts, no, through simple faith. All of us can have access to his power and new life through simple faith. This is what the woman exemplifies for us and why he holds her up as this example of faith. Now, this would have been shocking to his followers and to the people around him in the first century that he points out this woman is who you should exemplify as somebody to model your faith after. It would have been like 3 brain explosion emojis to them. They wouldn't have had a category for it. Because look with me one more time at just kind of 3 things that make it where she doesn't fit, she doesn't belong, she shouldn't be there, and yet Jesus responds to her. Mark 7, verse 26 says, the woman was a Greek born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. So the first reason why she wouldn't have been looked at as a model of faith is because she was a woman. In the first century, women were viewed in a very inferior way, that they were just there to bear children. They couldn't even offer eyewitness testimony in court. They were viewed as less than. And so in Jesus' day, for her to be in the room would have been like over the top. But for her to be lifted up as an example of faith, they would just have been unheard of for the people of the day. The second thing it says there, what? She was a Greek from Syrian Phoenicia. This meant she was an outsider, a foreigner. She didn't belong. That region that she's from would have been historically the region of Tyre, which kind of sits above the nation of Israel and the lands that they were in. And it was viewed as kind of this like wealthy, opulent, godless place, this group of people that just were so different and unlike them. They were really enemies. It would be an equivalent, would be like somebody in Israel today saying, oh, look at that Palestinian. That's who we should be like. Okay, that's the level of animosity that would have been between these groups. And then the passage also says what? It says that her daughter was possessed by an impure spirit. And so maybe like a lot of us today, like the Pharisees were kind of like, again, rules upon rules to keep them from being contaminated by anything bad. And so they're like, we're not going near this woman, even with a regulation size 39.5-foot Grinch pole. Like, we don't want anything to do with whatever's going on in her life here. Like, because in their world, somebody either sinned or there was a curse going on for that to happen. And so we'd say maybe there's some bad juju there. I just don't want to be part of what's going on. And so she's got all 3 of these things working against her for being somebody that would be noticed, much less elevated as an example of faith. But this is what Jesus does here. This is what he does in this passage. And so rather than having the self-satisfied pride of the Pharisees, Jesus wants to make sure that you and I know this. Don't bring any of that to try and justify yourself before me. Instead, I'm looking for people desperate to know my power and to trust in me. This is what he wants us to walk away with. This is the example that this woman from Mark 7 gives us. And so this woman also teaches us something about suffering. Her suffering allows her heart to be shaped in a posture that's ready to receive the saving that Jesus offers. This woman allows suffering to shape her heart to be in a posture that's ready to receive that saving. The question is for you and I, what is the state of our heart? Like, honestly, are you more like the Pharisee and your trust is in your bank account, your own hard work, your own ability, your position, your relative health, whatever it is? Or are you learning to put your trust into Jesus, what he can do, what he and he alone can do? Because at the end of the day, you and I each are just one big suffering moment away from being awoken with that alarm clock. The question is, will we respond? Will we respond like this woman? And so, again, it's not a question of if it's gonna happen, it's when suffering will come along. We had one of these moments early on in our marriage in kind of our mid-20s. As I said, we're from California originally, the Los Angeles area. And so in the 2000s, early 2000s, something funny was happening with the housing market. Housing prices were jumping $15,000 to $20,000 a year. Now, if you're under 30, just go ahead and Google subprime mortgage bubble, and the rest of this story is gonna make a lot more sense as we go through it for you. So, and then everybody else, you know where this is going, right? So the common wisdom of the day was get a house, get a house, get a house, get a house, get anything, right? Like get a tent and an underpass, right? Because that's gonna go up 15, 20K a year. You can live in it for a couple of years, walk away with some equity and put that down on something better. And so we're in our mid-20s, like I guess this is what we're supposed to do. Nobody's really walking us through this. And so we buy, no joke, the ghettoest condo that we can find. We call it the McCondo because we shared an alley with a double-decker McDonald's, okay, like a two-story McDonald's. We were not ba-da-ba-ba-ba loving it, okay? This was like, again, we had, I kid you not, the neighbors upstairs in the unit above us, before weed was legal in California, they were selling it out of their place, but they would never respond to their own buzzer. So people would come at all hours of the day and night and just buzz any other unit to try and get in to procure what they wanted. And so we've got a couple young kids at the time, and we're like, man, this isn't great, but we can get through anything for a couple of years. So we bought around 2006, 2007. The problem with buying in 2006 in Southern California is that 2007 and 2008 comes after that. And so, the value of our condo was cut in half over 18 months. We lost half of the value. And so we're sitting here thinking, oh, great. So now we're stuck in the McCondo for a decade. This is wonderful. And so our realtors are we're going to talk about them, but they offer us some other common wisdom of the day. They say, hey, there's this thing called a short sale. You can just get out of this situation and walk away with no consequences. Some of you are like, is there a law against this thing yet, by the way? Anyways, so we line this up. They're lining up a buyer. His funding doesn't come through. He doesn't qualify. And our mortgage company doesn't say, oh, no worries, we'll try again. Instead, they say, we are foreclosing on you. Good day, sir. You have 30 days, right? No recourse, no options. And my wife, Amy and I, we're like, this doesn't happen to people like us, right? Like, we're hard workers. We're doing everything right the right way. We're two firstborns, right? Like, we ooze responsibility. How can this be happening to us? But we were in a spot where we had to be humbled. Right? We had to be humble enough and desperate enough to say, God, we need you to do something different here. Like, I need something different. And so we had a lot of Jesus and a little bit of Dave Ramsey because we're like, okay, we got to clearly get a plan, and we're dumb with our money and he's smarter. And so, Amy is doing the finances and she's like, here's your envelope, here's your $10 allowance for the week. I'm like, $10? What do I do with $10 in a week, right? So, but have you ever heard anybody say this? I would never want to live through that situation again, but I'm so glad that I did, right? I'm so glad that I did because God showed up in a powerful way in that season of our life where we had to be humble enough, desperate enough to say, there's not enough of Jeff and Amy to figure this out on our own. We need you to act. And so because of that, it gave us a perspective on our finances, that we needed to be better stewards of what God was entrusting to us. We needed to get out of our debt all the way. And so we ended up a couple years later moving 3,000 miles away from our friends, family, everyone we knew, where we knew 0 human beings in Virginia. We moved there for my wife Amy's job as a behavioral therapist at first. I found a ministry job at a church in the area. And again, we were moved to trust what God had for us and to get into a different situation. Paid out down all of our debt by 2016. And then in 2018, we were looking to move back closer to family. We thought we would end up back in California, but God had different plans. He had a church opportunity for us right here in the Pacific Northwest, and it's been such a great fit. It's been such a great match. But here's the thing. If we never got to the point to allow that financial suffering and that moment of like foreclosure, 7 years on your record, right? Having to walk through that and live through that and needing God to show up, if we didn't get to that place, we would have never experienced God's power and saw his hand, how he's leading us. See, it served for us as that alarm clock to awaken us to our true need for God. And so, I don't know what it is, again, for you that you're facing, what you're going through today. But regardless of the causes, whether it's self-inflicted, whether it's something that's outside of your circumstances, it's been inflicted upon you, what I know is this: God wants to get your attention, and he wants to lead you to somewhere different and somewhere good. Even if it means you coming to the feet of Jesus and saying, I will take whatever bread you'll give me, whatever I can feast on, even if it's just crumbs, that's what I'm willing to take from you. That's the place in which God can act in our midst. And so if you've been following Jesus for, again, years or even decades, my action step for you, what do you do? How do you emulate the woman here from Mark 7? I encourage you to share your story. Share your story. This week, would you pray maybe a dangerous prayer? God, would you give me the eyes to see and the ears to hear someone else's need where I can share my story and be an encouragement to them? Now, what I don't mean is like, you hear somebody talking about something similar you're going through, and you say, okay, here's the binder, and here's steps 1 through 5 on how you're gonna get out of the situation. No, don't do that, okay? But if you hear somebody going through something, a coworker, a neighbor, family member, something you've gone through, would you say, man, I faced something similar to that. Man, tell me more about how you're doing, and allow them to share, and then encourage them with your story. There's a guy at our church. He's in his 30s, mid 30s or so, and out of the blue, got a diagnosis: brain tumor. Two young kids, 2 elementary age kids at home, completely not on the radar. And so we're praying for him to be healed, and he had a successful surgery. But one of the things that God did in that season, he brought another friend alongside of him who also had a brain tumor as a younger man. And so he had the scar to prove it, as we're in this series, Skeptics and Scars, right? He had the scar to prove it. And he was able to come alongside this guy and be an encouragement to not say again, here's how you do everything the way I did it, but to say, man, God was faithful in this process. And so you have a story to tell. One of the great things about this woman's example is that her suffering isn't just meaningless and wasted, right? God is using that moment she went through that was so difficult, this painful situation with her child, to encourage us today, right? That is crazy. But even crazier, God wants to use your story to encourage somebody else today, if we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear who we can share with. Now, if you're here and you're not sure what faith in Jesus looks like for you right now, you're still exploring faith, or maybe if you're being honest, faith has just kind of been in the background for you, like a relational connection, pursuit of God. It's just kind of drifted, okay? Here's what I would encourage you, if that's the place you're in today. Would you share that burden, whatever it is, that suffering that you're going through, with at least one other person? Do you know most people say that they don't have one other person outside of a spouse or maybe a parent to share with? They're going through something difficult. They don't have anywhere else to turn. And so would you take a step? Maybe it's right now this morning that you're saying, you know what, I'm at the end of my rope. Whether it's a health diagnosis, whether it's my finances, whether it's a relational conflict, whatever it is, I need to just have somebody help carry that burden for me this morning. We got under the cross right here. Before you go, make your way over here. You can pray with somebody right now this morning. Don't leave without that if you need to do that this morning. Or maybe your next step is gonna be writing on that Connect card and saying, hey, I need help figuring out how I'm gonna walk through this difficult period that I'm kind of suffering through. Or maybe for you, we're turning the corner here in about another month. We've got another month of summer or so, and the new year really starts in September, ministry-wise at least, and church-wise. And so maybe you're gonna get in a group. It's one of my secret goals, by the way, as a pastor, that everyone in church would have that group of people that you have, that like 8 to 12 people that you text, right? The first people you go to with that prayer request, the first people you go to celebrating something, that everyone in church would have that kind of community. And so maybe you need to get into a group this fall. I don't know what that next step of faith looks like, but what I do know is this, as we saw from the example of this woman from Mark 7, that suffering can serve like that alarm clock to awaken us to our need for God. Don't let the season you're in pass, whether it's big or small, whatever that burden is, without being awoken to God's presence alongside you, and to know the fact that the Christian faith, what it teaches us, is that we have a God who suffers with us. He went to the cross. He is not distant or indifferent, but he walked this path of suffering so that we could be with him. Would you trust him today? Let's pray. God, I thank you so much for the hand of blessing that you placed upon GracePoint as a church. I pray for each and every person here, whatever we need to do to just be more awake to your presence. However we need to walk through that suffering differently as a result of this woman's example, would we act on that? Would we do that, whether it's a big step or a small step? That we would be increasingly changed because we're choosing to journey with you, Jesus. Help us to just take whatever our next step is today. And it is in the powerful name of Jesus that I pray. Amen. Well, thank you so much for the privilege of hosting me, having me here at GracePoint. It really is an honor. I'll be either right here or out in the lobby afterwards if you have any questions about any of this. But have a great Sunday. Thank you so much for having me. Have a great week.